current service in Berkeley and Oakland.
And what was your name again? I'm sorry.
My name is Dermot Hickish. Great to be here. I'm head of new markets development for Gig Car Share. We're based out of Jack London Square over in Oakland. Let's just get this started. I'd also like to introduce Sloan Morgan, fellow team member who has joined us tonight. She's very close to the Albany border, so it's easy enough to leave your family function, so thank you for coming. So just quickly on the agenda, why car sharing, what are the city and public benefits behind one-way car share and car sharing in general, some of the core elements and discoveries with a program like this, how are we operating in Oakland, Berkeley, how do we think about this as a multi-city initiative. So right into why car sharing. So you're seeing a lot of disruptive trends right now in mobility. The millennial generation, which I'm almost a part of, but not quite, has really been transforming the way people are using, say, cell phones and consumer products and the like. 30% are actually not thinking about purchasing a new car in the near future. So what does that mean for how they get around? And how can we help them get around if they maybe don't need a car all the time, but on occasions when they want to go to Costco or maybe they have kids and they need to go to pick them up from soccer practice, how do we help them in those times of need rather than all the time? Average car share, the average private car is used 64 minutes a day right now. It's almost 1 hour out of 24 hours, and that's why you see cars parked on streets all over the place. And that's really what we try to focus with car sharing is it's not just you and your car, it's you and a bunch of other members that have access to this car and the many other cars we have available. And fortunately, the trends are showing that people are getting into car sharing more often, as well as other ride sharing alternatives, which is a great sign. We don't necessarily need to own our own car unless we're driving a heck of a lot of miles and live in a rural area at this point. And of course, equity, one of the biggest costs around any city in the US or anywhere else in the world is the cost of private vehicle ownership. It's estimated by AAA, we do an annual survey, $8,000 a year is the true cost of that vehicle per year to have your own car. So how do we actually help people enable the mobility to do what you do with your own vehicle, but don't have to pay $8,000 to achieve those base needs? So AAA, you might be familiar with, you might be members already. 150 years, 115 or 16 years in the industry, actually started in San Francisco in the Bay Area, although Chicago claims to be the original membership organization. And where it became about was really in the change from the horse and the buggy to the automobile. So the picture on, I believe it's your left, is Market Street circa 1904, 1905, all horse and buggy, lots of great pedestrians, bicycles and the like, street rail and the like, nothing else. 10 years later, you see Ocean Beach, and all you see now is automobiles. And that created a lot of challenges with the transition to mobility. There was no regulations around vehicles, no insurance, no street signs, no DMV. AAA has really been a part of actually creating the first DMV in California, putting up the first road sign to say, hey, hard left, don't go straight, et cetera. Unfortunately, the government has taken that on many decades ago, and we're very proud and happy to see that. Where we see ourselves again today is like, how do we help our members and drivers across the US or future drivers really see mobility in a new light and help them use things when they need to, but also look at the whole spectrum of mobility. So again, this is where car sharing really fits in. It's not the only answer. There's carpooling, there's bike sharing, ride hailing has appeared, which we also include taxis in that as they were the original ride hail organization, peer-to-peer, and of course public transit. And in the Bay Area especially, this is where we look at it and say, people need a vehicle on certain special occasions, especially when they're carrying a lot of goods or others. But there's also that ability to do that first mile, last mile connection that someone might not feel safe to walk there in the late night hours or other things like that. Why one-way car sharing in particular? I'm sure you might be all familiar with round trip. Zipcar and the like have been doing that for 20 plus years at this point. So one way is really helping enable reduction in total vehicle miles traveled, as well as getting people from A to B and not needing to necessarily be forced or motivated to do that return trip if they don't want to. A really good example of this is Super Bowl is coming up. You might go to Whole Foods or Sprouts right before the game. Go there, have fun, drink your Bud Lights, etc., but take another way home. You don't need to take your one-way car share all the way back. And it's a good example of getting the things to where you need to go, but not needing to be relying on that piece of transportation on the way back. There's many other things that come along. A lot of people really like one-way car share for the multi-errand trips. So they really have a couple different things to do, the dry cleaning, picking up flowers for the significant other, and then thinking of things along the way, and then really ending their trip and going about their day, and then maybe using another gig later on that day. So how does it work? It is app-enabled. And so we cheekily say there's an app for that. So it really is basically within 10 minutes or 5 minutes even, you can download the app on your phone, be verified with your driver's license as far as your DMV history and everything else. We will be able to filter through to make sure these are people that are of good driving standard to be allowed to become members. And then really you're paid for what you use. So we're not charging upfront, we're not doing surge pricing. This is a very flat structured fee that will charge the members based on their usage. So say for instance you drive 30 miles in 45 minutes, instead of charging the $2.50 a mile, you'll just automatically be charged the $15 an hour. So we'll try to give you the cheapest rate possible out of all that. Insurance is covered by gigs, so every member has the insurance coverage, which enables them to rest assured that if there is an accident or someone else is involved in that accident, there is coverage going both ways. And again, there's no admin or additional fees. I'd also like to point out that we do have RFID cards that are available. So if someone, say, drives to Big Sur and the cell phone system is down, they have a way to get back in the car. Also, there's a lot of people that still use smartphones. So we have a number of members that still use smartphones that really like gig car share. So they have RFID cards, and they're able to call our member center, reserve a car, get to use it, and go about doing what they want to do for the day. Operations-wise, we're very fortunate that we are basically a child of AAA, if you will, or a subsidiary. So we do have access to all the great tow trucks and the maintenance facilities and everything else. And we have our dedicated team that really focuses on the base elements of keeping these vehicles very clean, refueled, all the general maintenance are up to safety code, as well as the other things that come along. Rebalancing is a big thing on any given occasion. Maybe you'll see in the morning, UC Berkeley students will go from University Village to, if we had gigs available at University Village. We have a lot of gigs near University Village, so just as a clarification currently. But in the morning, a lot of UC Berkeley students will drive to UC Berkeley, and then our rebalancing team will be there to make sure we distribute it out so you don't see clustering of multiple vehicles on the exact same block. So we actively measure that and monitor that and really try to predict what's going on. I had a number of comments after the Women's March this last weekend that like, hey, I was able to take a gig at the end line to go back to with my family to go pick up the car, our car at the other side. It would be great if we thought more about that for like big events. You know, how do we manage this so the flow of availability meets the demand? And we're getting better and better at that every day. And we really use data and reporting to review and assess what's going on. So in the case of the city of Berkeley and Oakland, we report quarterly on our activities there, number of members, average time parked, a whole wide range of data that we'd be very happy to share similarly with Albany. So generally the city and public benefits, you know, we have really 4 pillars that we work around. One is improving regional transportation. So please, I live in San Francisco. Don't drive across the Bay Bridge if you don't have to. I mean, late at night when BART's not running, that's fine. But going by BART or something else like that is highly superior to that bridge experience. And that's what we're really trying to focus in on, is making sure that our members are those types of members that are using that for the first mile, last mile sort of solution for transportation, and getting away from this whole congestion thing that's happening all over the Bay Area. We recently surveyed our members. 31% have actually responded saying that they are using it to get to a local transportation hub, whether it's BART or AC Transit or the like. It's a really good indicator that those that are using it are really getting it, and we're very happy. And the nice thing is, since it's one way, as soon as, say, I drop my car off at a local BART stop, Sloan could appear off the BART and then take the gig the other direction. And we're seeing a lot of that happening. So supply meeting demand by people going in different directions as we're all working in different cities and living in different cities. The congestion reduction piece has been really exciting for me personally. UC Berkeley did this study in 2016, and they reviewed 5 cities with Car2Go, which is one of the original one-way car share operations, and they were considering opening here. And then we were lucky enough to be the first ones to open in Berkeley and Oakland. But their study found that every car share vehicle in a local market was reducing private vehicle ownership by 7 to 11 vehicles. Which means that there's a lot more parking availability, whether it's used for bike lanes, for parklets, for trees, or parking of other things or other activities. It just enables a lot more space for this resource that's available there, while still giving people the mobility that they need to do what they need to do. And the real reason for that, the gig, other car share vehicles are being used on average 6 hours a day, rather than the 64 minutes that a private vehicle is being used on average per day. Equity is the other piece. I know I referenced this earlier, and we talked about the $8,000 per year annual cost. Really, when you break it down by annual household income, that's when you see how dramatic car sharing can be to enabling families to, maybe they still own one car, but they won't own 2 or 3, and enabling that sort of mobility where they're not close to public transit or other safe forms of transportation to get around. And it's been really helpful to see these studies and say this could help people, say especially late at night when public transportation isn't running, how does someone that might be doing cleaning services or something like that in a local office building safely get to where they need to go? On the pollution side, we're 100% Toyota hybrid Prius Cs, so our average vehicle mile per gallon is 46 miles per gallon. We're very committed to not going below that, and we have our eyes set on going zero emission at some point in the near future as infrastructure and battery range gets better. So we're very excited to keep going that direction. The same study that we did the congestion and private vehicle reduction measure also found that each one-way car share vehicle was currently reducing 4 to 7 metric tons of GHGs per year. And the reason why there's a range, again, it was a 5-city study, so we looked at all 5 cities and reported out that way. If you do have questions on the academics, Susan Shaheen at UC Berkeley is fantastic. It's one of the leading institutions on sustainable transportation in the country, and they're currently doing a review for Berkeley and Oakland right now for us to gather intelligence about what's going on with our operation. So some of the core elements of how this is working, first and foremost, having an engaged city partner. In our case, we have 2 very engaged city partners in Oakland and Berkeley, and it's been really great working with them. So we share data, we help each other out. There's constant communication with that team and myself and our team. In the case of Albany, we've been looking at this as an MOU agreement to take a pilot step forward and see how car sharing works, rather than what the larger cities have been doing with actually changing public policy. And namely, that's around the fact that in Oakland and Berkeley, there's existing parking meters as well as designated residential parking. That's where those are the 2 key metrics that ends up being like, okay, we need to go straight to city council and start working through those pieces, whereas a municipality like Albany, there's an opportunity to potentially do something sooner. And then the HomeZone. So this is the really interesting part of like, how does this actually work with one-way car share? So we call it the HomeZone. This is now 19 square miles, I believe. I might be off by a decimal point, but basically you can pick up a gig anywhere in the system. So on the app, the little gig icon would show you where the nearest ones are, and you can hit reserve. 30 minutes later, within 30 minutes, you're able to get there, and the car just lets you in, hit the start button, and you can get driving. And then you're allowed to end your trip anywhere in this HomeZone. You're also permitted to leave the home zone. So say if you have a doctor's appointment in Walnut Creek or something like that, you can leave, but you always have to end your trip back here. So as you can tell, Berkeley is very neighborly, and because the activity there has basically brought these gigs right to the edge of Albany, and there's been a lot of demand, and as a result, we expanded the Berkeley home zone to use the Solano side of Berkeley to expand the gigs there, which has been really great, and we've seen a lot of positive results so far. I'd also like to add within this, there's satellite zones that are available. So one of our most popular areas is the ability for gigs to drive to Park and Fly at Oakland International. So say over Thanksgiving weekend, we had many gigs that were driving there so people could park there, get to their flight, and whether there was enough people coming off or not, we would reallocate them based on that, which rather than having your own car parked there for 6-7 days, people were very happy to be able to drop off a gig and have someone else use that from that location. So we are looking at other satellite zones. Where can we amplify transportation connections and places where people really need to go that might not be as conveniently accessible for each person. We do have street level accuracy, so in the case of our partner cities, we actually report right down to the specific parking meter as far as where we're located or where the gigs are located for a period of time, so people are able to really understand how long is that car there, where else is it going. We do not have trip data while people are on the move, and that's really around privacy concerns since these are members, so we don't want to currently, or I think in the near future or any future, really know exactly every place a person is driving along their meander. So it's really the start and the stop. That's the critical pieces for us. And I'd just like to highlight that Albany could really be added quickly. We're very excited that we have another 250 vehicles being added to this home zone over the last 2 weeks and the next 2 weeks, bringing our fleet size to 500 total Priuses. Recently, we've done a couple of home zone expansions. We're going to be actually expanding to Fruitvale by Feb 10th. And I'll be honest, we've saved some room for Albany. So I'm looking forward to the Q&As after this. And yeah, so since launch, a couple of just really interesting discoveries we've had. Already 11.2% of respondents who own a car are actually saying they're considering selling their vehicle. This is a survey from July of 2017, so it is a couple months outdated, but we had I think 1,400 respondents to this survey, just as a quick pulse check to see what was going on. 31% said they did take it to a local transit hub, as I mentioned before, and 63% said on that trip or a trip previous they had one or more people with them, and that's really what we're thinking about. This isn't just about solo driving. It's like we want people to be choosing to use a car when maybe they have someone else that doesn't like riding a bicycle, or they have a ton of groceries or things like that. It is one piece of the mobility spectrum, and that's where we're focused on. Spontaneous usage has been great. Our first 3 months were really fantastic. Rentals were 2.5 times what we projected in utilization, which is how much time is this car being used versus how much time is it parked, was 5x what we were expecting in year one. And that data was based on our sister AAA organization up in Vancouver, British Columbia, which has an operation called EVO, which has been there for 4 years. So we were able to get their data, really understand what the market might look like, and that's why we've actually reordered vehicles, because we're having so much interest and excitement and usage. So that early stage results were fantastic. We were really reaching later year expectations, and we're really excited to see members, which are residents of this city. I think we have 119 Albany residents that are already members. We have over 22,000 members in total, the majority of which are from the Bay Area. Although we do have people from LA that are now flying in for their regular meeting and deciding to use gig when they get here. And just lastly, the final slide is on the discussion side. So, the ideal home zone, like what would it look like in Albany? We really looked at it, and through Aleda's advice and the like, we saw the opportunity for, honestly, most of Albany. And we looked, and I've carved out one map that's roughly 1.1 square miles of the total area. It's the densities are right, the memberships are here already, and the interest is here, and you do have really great commercial corridors that people are trying to get to do business and do their shopping and the like. As far as deployment and timing goes, like I mentioned, we were actually ready right away. So really would love to hear your thinking around it, and we are patient as well, but we are very eager to make a splash. So within that, how many cars are we talking about for 1.1 square miles is really 20 vehicles is what we would be deploying in this region, or the city in particular. And then our commitment would be our operations team would be managing it like the rest of the Oakland and Berkeley HomeZone. We are redeploying vehicles. So if one is lost, as we say, lost in the wild, and it's getting close to that 72-hour max parking time frame, we have a 52-hour alert. So if a vehicle hasn't been utilized in 52 hours, it goes on our operations team list, and the operation team moves that before. And then we recognize that 90-minute parking zones in Albany are very unique as far as our experience thus far. In Berkeley and Oakland, we have permission to park in 2-hour zones indefinitely, and I just wanted to share how that thinking went about and what we wanted to share with you as you think this through as an option is that essentially in higher commercial areas, one-way car share operations get used significantly more. And it makes sense because if you go to the dry cleaners to pick up your stuff, you walk outside, are you going to get a taxi, you try to walk all this home, or if there's a gig nearby, you might take that as an option. So typically the usage in a commercial corridor for one-way car sharing versus residential is almost 4 to 1. I had our team pull data for 2 of the key commercial corridors just to see a subset of the information to give you an idea. Like, I know the biggest concern is like, oh, well, if you're in 90-minute parking and you're there for 2 days, this isn't going to work. We totally understand that, and that's not the case. These vehicles are in positions where people want to use them. So in the case of the 2 study areas, just give me a second because I just got this. My handwriting is not the best, so it's going to take me a minute. So we looked at 4th Ave, Delaware to Addison, and the minimum amount of time, this was a December 1st to 15th review of our vehicles that had parked along that commercial corridor. The shortest amount of time one car was there was 8 minutes, and the median was 3 hours. So in a 2-hour parking zone, that you might understand where, okay, that added up a little longer. In the case of when it's at a parking meter, like you see here, in those cities we are paying per minute at the meters, so there's that understanding there. And we still manage that for really reutilization, because if a car's not moving, it's not in the right spot, and that's our philosophy, and that means the business models could be working better by focusing on other high-use areas. In the case of Telegraph Ave in Oakland, from 23rd to 29th, the minimum amount of time a car was there was 6 minutes, and that's between different users. So we're not looking at someone that parked the car and then ran into a store and got back in the same car. We're really looking at a car available to someone else. And the median was 2 hours and 53 minutes. So I just want to illustrate, like, these cars are moving. I want to be transparent in saying they're at exactly 90 minutes. It would be very challenging for us to be able to make that happen, especially in the first year before members are really building up and growing. But just want to throw that out there as like how we're looking at it and our commitment to that. And just, we are very excited about Albany. Our president actually lives exceptionally close to Solano and has personally removed or reallocated or rebalanced vehicles on his own time on weekends and the like. So you have a very local focus with some very senior people on our team. So we're very committed to this market, to say the least. And I think that's everything on my end. So I'd love to open it to Q&As if you want.
Great. Thank you. So first, questions from the commission?
Can I ask a follow-up about the statistics of the usage in limited parking zones? You mentioned the minimum time and the median time. The median, I think, in both cases was about 3 hours, between 2 and 3 hours. Do you have a maximum or like a top quartile or something?
Yeah, the
Like
maximum.
ones that stay there for longer, how long are they staying?
Sure, the max that we saw in both of those areas was, I can send you the exact number, but it was definitely under 24 hours. And that includes the overnight component. Yeah.
And do you need, in the agreement with the city, is there a city policy to not issue any tickets?
No, and sorry, I could have been clear on that. We pay 100% of all tickets in towing.
But what about tickets in the 90-minute zone? Just for exceeding the 90 minutes?
So the 90-minute piece would be the one that would be a new challenge for us here. So we have like two decisions, and you know, it's up to you all to think through like what's the best way forward for Albany, and is it a short-term solution? Then there's a long-term solution later. You know, our experience and belief is, you know, the more options for people to park in, especially near commercial corridors, will enable more business to be done there and more usage in that area. And then further improve the uptake. In the case of Oakland and Berkeley, you know, we spent, or actually Car2Go spent the extra time to make the agreements where the 2-hour parking limit, there was an exemption for it. So the parking tickets that we'll typically get in a gig would be, say we have a member agreement that everyone agrees to when they join. So if a member actually decides 1 hour before street sweeping happens, they park the gig there. We have a minimum of 10 hours. That if you're in a gig, you're not allowed to park in street sweeping under 10 hours. Otherwise, we have the right to charge you for the ticket if we receive a ticket and pay for it. Similarly, we unfortunately haven't had every member being perfect, and so some members have accidentally parked in a commercial loading zone or the like, and we'll pay those tickets, or typically that's a tow. We'll pay the tow, and then we'll seek reimbursement from the members on occasions. You know, we're a pretty nice organization, being AAA. You know, we're about the members, so typically the first one is on us, and then then it escalates from there.
I guess what I'm trying to figure out is, are you asking the city to grant gig an exemption from our usual 90-minute limit, or is that something to be determined?
Yeah, I think strategically, I think the model would work best if there was a city exemption. I think we could think of it in two ways, though. If we wanted to see how it went, if there was a lot of interest in just trying this out sooner than later, and not having to go through a whole development of ordinance for approving things like that, which might be a requirement with the city of Albany, we could pilot without the 90-minute zones, and then work towards that over time based on what we're seeing for usage and experience. Or we could spend the time to work through to get permission for an exemption for 90 minutes if the city was interested in that aspect.
So your suggestion is that in the pilot, people could not drop off a car in the 90-minute zone. They could park there while they're shopping and continue to use the car, but if they wanted to
leave
the car, they would have to get to an unrestricted zone?
That's correct. So that would be, say, option one, and then the other option, which, you know, we'd be more pro for, would be like if there was a way that you can wave the magic wand and say, okay, let's give it a 60-day trial where you guys park in the 90-minute zones. We'll not ticket you or forgive the tickets during this time frame, and let's see how it goes. So there'd be that option as well, or waiting through for a full.
Is there a way we can tell, or that our enforcement officers can tell by looking at the car whether it's still in use or has been left there?
Has been left. Yes. So let me go back a couple. Where one strikes the RFID reader, this really is what tells you if the availability is there. So where the RFID card is here, if it's flashing green, it is in use. So that's a sign of the RFID card had just been read, and it's like, okay, this car is yours now. If it's red, that means the car is available. It's not in use.
So it sounds like one possibility would be to tell our enforcement officers that if it's green, they should go ahead and treat it like any other car, chalk the tires, and eventually write a ticket. And if it's red, then use the exemption and don't write the ticket. Is that what you have in mind?
Yeah, I mean, that could definitely work.
Okay.
I mean, fortunately, every single car is exactly the same. They're all black Prius Cs with blue bike racks on them, so there won't be much confusion as far as is this a gig or not.
Right.
And that's one option.
Okay. Another question I had was about, you mentioned people using it to get to the BART station. Where would people park the car? Can they park in BART lots or?
So we have dedicated parking in 6 BART parking lots. Right now, it's only 1 spot in each BART location in their established parking with a gig sign on it. And then on certain occasions, West Oakland is very popular for us. We might have 10 gigs arrive there during rush hour. I do the reverse commute from San Francisco, so I often benefit from one of those 10 arriving. Fortunately, in those areas, there's an ample amount of non-permitted parking as well as residential parking. So often people might be driving a few miles in, they park at 3 blocks away, and then they walk over.
Okay.
And we are looking at adding more dedicated parking spots to these BART locations, just given the popularity. So we've done heat maps in the past, and it's part of our reporting requirement to the cities. And in Berkeley, as an example, our top 3 locations outside of UC Berkeley, which is the most frequented spot, is Ashby BART, is it downtown? Safeway, and then one other BART location. So you see these clusters of vehicles ending trips there and starting trips there.
Last location that you mentioned, Ashby, BART, Safeway, and?
I think it's Rock Ridge.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, as far as Berkeley goes, yeah.
You mentioned that the cars reduce overall GHG emissions. Can you give us kind of an intuitive sense of how that plays out?
Yeah, like how does an automobile actually reduce
Yeah.
emissions? Yeah, it's a great question. So that was, again, through the 5-city car study by UC Berkeley. And what they looked at was 2 things. One was reduction in total vehicle miles traveled by members. What happens if someone is able to sell their car or decide not to buy their own private vehicle? They'll use a one-way car share option as one of their mobility solutions, but then they'll likely bike more, take more public transit and the like, versus what they've done in the past. And the other piece was those that were selling their vehicles, they were typically selling, on average, a 12-year-old vehicle, which is highly fuel inefficient and has a lot of other safety and air pollutant issues with it. So we were getting a lot of clunkers off the road because they realized, like, all this maintenance cost, all this issues, I can drive a better car and save some money and do something right for the planet.
And my final question is about, you mentioned data sharing with the city. Do you have like a specific set of data that you typically share with all cities, or is that negotiated case by case, which data you share?
We're love to hear your interest in what you'd be looking for. Currently, Oakland and Berkeley have almost the exact same data set that they request. There's a couple slight different questions that each city asks. We think they're already asking the right questions. There might be some unique ones come up, and I know in the draft that we sent to the team already, we had a number that we were suggesting to report on. And the nice thing is, if it is the same data, then there's benchmarking and comparisons that can happen. But we're open to seeing if there's something unique with Albany that might be of interest to you. Yeah.
Robert?
I think Harry covered most of my questions. Just some clarifications. Do you limit where the cars can be parked? Are they specific corridors or adjacent to the corridors? Or because if you're looking at limited parking, say on Solano Avenue, and maybe less limited parking on the side streets, do you guys limit where the cars can be parked?
So our member agreement has some specific requirements, and it's fortunately most of the requirements based on the agreements with Oakland and Berkeley are very like owning your own vehicle. So don't park in disabled access, don't park in commercial loading zones, yellow, red. The unique part in those cities is if it's 60-minute or less parking, so like really quick stops for a parking meter and the like, they're not allowed to park there. So they're aware of that. And then we have basically what's called a master permit. So they're permitted to park in all the residential zones, say of Berkeley, or in the parking meter space.
Got it. Okay. Another question is, would the home zone just become larger with including Albany? So would the home zone be Albany, Berkeley, and and Oakland for a user in Albany, or is the home zone just Albany?
No, the home zone ideally would be a growth of what we have already.
Okay.
So in theory, we'd be placing, say, 20 vehicles, pretend it's day one, in Albany, so that members here and new members have the ability to realize there's something nearby. But then the other vehicles would have the ability to come here and shop or visit a friend and leave that car for someone else. Our team is very aggressive on managing fleet allocation, so say a concern about 500 vehicles all in Albany, that would mean Oakland and Berkeley would have 0 vehicles available. So unless President Barack Obama's here for the day or something like that and everyone comes in, that would be like the rare occasion where there might be enough demand to push every single vehicle here. But it's a very unlikely scenario.
And then when do you end up rebalancing, like a
Yeah.
situation like that, or
So
at night?
part of it is predictive. So we need to be aware of when big events are going on. CalBear's playing. We did a lot of coordination with the city there to make sure there's actually event parking going on or closures of specific parking. So we had to really ensure our members were aware of that, and also encourage them to if they're going to take a gig, bring 4 people with them so they weren't just driving their own car up there. Most of our allocation on a daily basis is really focused around, okay, has a car been sitting somewhere too long?
Okay.
Let's move it, or what's the ratio? So we have micro geos to look at, like how many cars are in each little square mile or even less to see what the availability is.
So you want to
especially-
give it a chance for that car to get picked up on its own?
Correct. It's really in our business interest to make sure the cars are in the right spot.
Yeah. I don't know, Fareed, are you willing to just give any insight from Berkeley's perspective on this? I don't know. Generally,
Well, yeah,
permissions, city requirements.
No, I think it's been
challenges.
working well. The concerns that we get from residents would tend to be, hey, there's a bunch of gig cars parked on my street. And generally what we find out in those cases is that they live on a boundary street. The border of the home zone and the heat map that GIG has provided us shows that there's members who live beyond that. So they're driving the car as far as they can, stopping there and going on. So, this is something that, GIG has updated their home zones and moved them. So one location where we had that boundary issue going on, the home zone stretched, the issue went away. So that helps. The other piece that kind of relates to the Solano Avenue question is the idea that you want to put the vehicles where people want to go, and it's the residents who tend to be the most sensitive. So for Solano, my first thought was, well, the side streets have unlimited time parking, but then you're parked in front of someone's house. So you have the downside, the vehicle's less visible. So someone who comes out of the store may not see it, may not think of it, and now it's in front of someone's house who's more likely to complain, hey, that's a commercial vehicle parked on my street. Now, that's entirely different from if you or I drive and park on that street. It's a private car. They don't know whose car it is, so they don't know who to complain to.
Actually, we do. The nail ladies park on my street.
There you go.
Sorry.
But what that leads me to is the general idea that it would be better to allow parking on Solano in spite of the 90-minute time limit. In Berkeley, we said 2 hours was reasonable because we generally have 2 hours, 1 hour in some spots, and then the rest are green zones for short term. And we don't want a short-term parking space getting used up. 1 hour's sort of so-so, but a lot of our high-demand areas are 2 hours. And that's working well for us. It puts the car where it's most likely to get used. It's a benefit to the users. I think it's a benefit to the businesses. Most of the businesses have not been the ones complaining. It's been residences. So I would advocate for putting it on Solano. A few very specific issues came up relative to parking in, say, not an RPP zone, but a reserved permit zone, which we have very few of in Berkeley. But GIG was able to set up a geofence that would alert a driver that this is not a valid spot to park in to end your trip. And the first example that pops into my head for us would be Solano Strolls coming up tomorrow. So 24 hours in advance, Solano Avenue gets geofenced off. Don't park any cars here. So I think there's some small nuances there that I would think we'd want to consider. But in general, the experience in Berkeley has been positive, and GIG's been pretty responsive relative to the concerns about this car's been parked here a long time, setting the 52-hour limit that they'll go out and move it before it even hits the 3-day limit. And obviously, as I've explained to many residents, the organization has no interest in letting a car sit that long. It's not generating revenue, serving the members if it is. So the incentives and motivations are all aligned in that sense. So that's pretty much my sense of it. I do think it's a good idea, and the questions have been good ones. I don't know that I had any questions. I think I've already answered all of my questions over the past year or more.
Great. I'm glad we have. I'm sure there's more to come. Yeah, and we are a dynamic organization. So like the 52-hour alert actually came out of a learning thanks to Berkeley City that we had set it too late. It was at 72 hours, and at that point, coordinating staff to move vehicles was too far along, and so we responded to that as quickly as possible to put it down to 52 hours. So, yeah, we're learning and improving as we're going. 7 months in, but fortunately with AAA's operational expertise and mobility and support has been very helpful to bring us through.
So let's say I'm relying on gig for my car trips, and I become injured. Now, obviously, when I'm driving the car, I can use my placard. If I want to park and hold, is that what you call it? Something like that. If I want to park and hold, I can leave my placard in the car, and I'm pretty well covered there. If I want to park in a handicap spot. But then I'm coming back to my apartment, and I want to park in the handicap spot on the street because it's close to the stairway. You got a solution for me?
That's a very tough question. So we have been approaching accessibility and been focused on that. It's a big issue everywhere, and especially in Northern California and with the cities here. So as an example, we do have hand controls. So if someone doesn't have the use of their feet to drive, they can actually call our member support care team. Of course, the 30-minute reservation needs to be 24 hours, honestly, in advance for us to be able to bring a car there for that person that really wants to drive. And typically that occasion would be someone that wants to leave town for the weekend or the like, rather than just go down to Safeway or something for a home delivery. In the case of that example, I think we want to coordinate with a specific drop-off. So if you are actually dropping into an ADA access location, we'd need to be looped in so we could rebalance it. Same amount.
So it sounds like you'd be willing to work with the...
We'd be willing to work with that. Of course, it's operationally, and it's expensive.
Sure.
And, but yeah, if that's part of it, we can work around it. Yeah.
Great.
So, and our member care center is 24 hours a day. Right now, we're averaging, I think, a call every 3 to 6 trips. Because people enjoy the member care stream is so sweet, so they really talk to people in a great way. So they are available. They're in Salt Lake City, fortunately with the AAA call center there. So we're staffed up to be able to handle any language as well as be available all the time. So if someone's stranded, they can get through.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Do you know what kind of usage your bike racks get?
Currently, I believe it's 3 to 4%. Based on the member survey, which it is a lifestyle view, and a lot of people nowadays are using Go Bike and the like, which is great to see, and soon to be Lime Bike here, so they don't always need to put a bike on their bike rack. But we have a number of members that really want us to expand into the hills so they can drive the cars up there and then take their mountain bikes down and drive another gig up there. But we'll go slow with that as from a rebalancing perspective.
I want to do the opposite. I want to ride my bike up the hill and drive the car down.
Carries available
Yeah,
for a very low rate.
we might be giving you a free trip on the other side then, if that's the case.
So it sounds like, from what Fareed described, that many of our streets in Albany have street sweeping and are unmarked. But it sounds like you could handle that with your app, notifying people that they're not in an appropriate spot?
Can you give me a bit more an explanation if they're unmarked?
Okay, so we have street sweeping once a month
Yep.
on all our streets.
Okay.
It's marked in the blocks north and south of Solano and north, east, and west of San Pablo. But beyond that, it's unmarked.
Okay.
So there's no signs and there's no tickets. It's just a voluntary agreement.
Yeah, so I think in a case like that, we want to do two things. One is have our operational team build it into their system. They use Zendesk, and they can make sure there's an alert so that 10 hours prior, they can take a review of those areas and see if there's any gigs out there. As well as for our Albany-based members, we'd want to send out, hey, gig is now in Albany. Here's a reminder of everything that goes on in the city to make sure that people are aware of it, as well as new members. That'd be an ongoing thing to communicate. Yeah.
There are numerous zones. It's a little complicated, but
Yeah,
Okay.
The days are available online, the sweeping days and everything.
They're knowable.
Yeah.
yes, they're definitely available.
If they're publicly available, we could figure out a way to work around that.
Great.
Yeah.
Is there a drive and change your mind time? So, for example, continuing my annoying neighbor in the block next to Solano, if somebody comes every day and parks a gig car in front of my house and I need to unload something, can I join gig and move the car? And if I get out in 5 minutes, will it charge me?
It would charge you if you moved it like one spot
Across the
over,
street.
Across the street.
In front of Bob's house.
You would.
I'm sorry, I'm playing a role here.
There's no minimum fee, so it might charge you. It's per mile at that point, so it might charge you 30 cents.
Okay.
Yeah. So there is the ability for local residents to do that. The other interesting thing that Fareed didn't have a chance to mention is like in the early stage, a lot of neighbors don't realize it's their neighbors that are members, and so you keep thinking that it's some random from Oakland that's parking right there, and it's your subletter in the basement that's parking under right at the same spot. So it's that.
Wait, I'm not permitted for that. I get what you mean, though.
We're mobility conversations.
I don't have a basement either.
But yeah, that's part of the learning curve that we try to work through and communicate. And our member care center is available to not just members, but anyone to call in and provide
Great.
feedback as well.
Thank you for entertaining my somewhat annoying questions.
You're very welcome.
All right.
So I have two simple ones, I think.
Okay.
So this keeping kind of upkeep of the information for geofences and everything, does that fall on city staff, or like how do you collect, like Solano Stroll, for instance, would that be up to the Solano Stroll committee to contact you to?
Yeah, if we did something with Solano Stroll, I think we'd look at it two ways. Is one, if like it, since we have a technology platform that manages our geofence, we typically need to give them 3 business days to say like, hey, do this. Although I think we could get creative if it's an annual thing on the exact same thing every year. Can we program that in? So in the case of like Cal Bears, when those events were happening, the home games, we didn't change the geofence, but we had messages going out to members that morning being like, hey, reminder, there's a major event going on today. These areas now have no parking zones, don't park a gig there.
So you look for that information from a variety of sources, not necessarily just city staff or?
Yeah, and again, the Cal Bears games are a really good example of this. From our first year experience was that we actually had a staff member that was over there to make sure that there wasn't too much clustering happening right before the game, so that they were available to move cars and the like. So in the case of Solano Stroll, I'll do a shameless plug and say we would likely help sponsor or support that event. So there might be a gig chauffeur setup going on in that case, but my boss has actually mentioned Solano Stroll a number of times and been an active participant, so it's very near and dear to our heart.
The other thing is just talking about the total cars. So I heard you mention, so there's 500 total cars in the system right now.
There's 290 on the road right now. So we
Okay.
released another 40 in the month of January, and we have the rest coming online over the next 2 weeks. So they're just getting the final bike racks on and getting their permits through the city put in their system. So we'll be hopefully launching the rest in the next 3 to 7 business days.
That gets you up to 500.
Correct.
Okay. And are they, I hear you say 20 for Albany, so is it kind of earmarked per city? Is that right now?
No, not completely earmarked per city. So the nature of free floating is, they go where they want to go.
Right.
But for an initial launch,
Okay.
we would commit to that amount of 20
Okay.
vehicles because of the size that we're proposing and what we think is here.
Okay.
But in the case, Berkeley's a really good example. We originally estimated that we had set out for the home zones in Berkeley and Oakland, that 1/3 of the activity would be in Berkeley, 2/3 would be in Oakland, and we allocated that way. And then, once the school season hit, over 50% of the usage was happening in Berkeley versus Oakland. So now the allocation has changed, and we manage that according to where the demand is. So.
And what if you got really ambitious? Do the cities have any say if you went to 20,000 cars? I don't know. Like, what are the levers for?
Sure, in both our existing city partners, they have a cap on how many we can do, and it's a pilot. So we're currently in a pilot with them, with each city for 2 years. And, if that'd be easy enough for us to put in the agreement that there could never be more than X in this region over this period of time. Ideally, if things worked out in 4 or 5 years' time, we do see the 7 to 11 vehicle reduction. All of a sudden, there's a lot more parking, and then there'll be a lot more demand for a shared asset. So that's when the cap starts raising up. In Oakland's case, their cap was at 440 per individual car share operator, and so they already made an amendment to let us go up to 500 because they hadn't thought through that half or more of that fleet was being shared with Berkeley. So they wrote it in, but we were saying, well, we have to request these as vehicles for you, but they're actually shared with Berkeley. So, yeah.
Any other questions from the commission?
What will be the next steps for the city to consider this, and what's the approval process?
Yeah, GIG sent us a draft agreement, and we're reviewing it with Jeff. We have some edits, and of course, we have these issues with the enforcement that we need to discuss with police. So the next steps will be maybe meeting internally with the different departments and see how we can work together. We can coordinate with GIG.
And then staff has the ability to execute the MOU?
No, that would be a city council.
City council, okay. Okay. It sounds to me like the biggest issue is the 90-minute parking, right? Because that's our way to turn over
That's
parking.
correct.
So are we going to provide an exception for that?
Right. Well, I received a couple of calls from residents who are members of GIG asking when GIG is coming to Albany. So just so you know.
So to resolve the question of what to do about the 90-minute parking zones, do you want the Traffic and Safety Commission to make a recommendation about that, or?
I think we should meet first with police and actually develop some ideas and discuss some ideas that we might have
Okay.
at this point.
We can bring it back to you for a recommendation.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like, as Robert said, that sounds like the major kind of policy question that comes up, and I'd like us to discuss that
Yep.
at some point, maybe not tonight.
Because, yeah, and also I think the pilot will let us, will inform us of as to how many cars we can put in, if we have an agreement with them as a cap. So we have, they suggest 20 right now. Is 20 enough, or maybe 20 is too, we need more? I mean, we don't know anything at this point. So it will be a future meeting with you.
Okay. So at this point, we usually ask for public comment, but I think there's no one here for that. Oh, actually, no.
Preston snuck in.
No comment? Okay. So I guess back to the commission to discuss what. Is there a more formal recommendation? No.
It's for information.
Item says for information only.
It's just
I'm wondering if it makes sense for staff to check in with the Solano Avenue Association and the,
we will check with internally first, and then with the stakeholders that will see this service on the streets too.
And-
So,
Sorry to interrupt. Just for transparency, we have presented to the Solano Avenue Merchants Association, so I just want to make you aware of that before you reach out.
great.
What was your feedback? What was your feedback from?
Very positive, yes.
And did they discuss that 90-minute question?
They didn't discuss the 90-minute piece in particular as far as getting the details of an exemption, but they were very eager to see and experience how it was going on the Berkeley side, as well as what they could see as an opportunity here, not only for customers but also for employees and for using it. And I'll make the shameless plug that if you wanted to pilot early without the 90-minute piece, we'd be happy to give that a try just to build familiarity. But of course, after speaking with enforcement and the like, but waiting is okay as well.
And that version is you cannot leave the car in the 90 minutes spots.
Correct. Yeah. Which technically is already aligned with our member agreement because our members are informed that they can't leave at below 2-hour parking for Oakland and Berkeley.
So the only thing preventing them from leaving it in Albany right now is that you have this home zone established, or is there something in the car that's preventing them from?
It's the home zone won't let them end the trip here.
It won't, okay.
And given that we're AAA and the like, we want permission from every city partner that
We
would.
appreciate that.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm imagining the gigs cars stopping at the city line. You know.
Shopping cart.
Yeah,
Exactly.
slowing down, No.
Very good.
So my only comment for the discussion with parking enforcement is simply that, and we had the same discussions with our parking enforcement in Berkeley. It's really quite simple, is that you don't enforce the time limits at the allowable areas if it's a gig car, and they're clearly branded, so there's not an issue. There was discussion because different operators may want to follow different rules or pay different amounts for the meters or for the residential preferential parking zones. They actually have a sticker on the car that shows what they've paid for. The free-floating parking at any meter over 2 hours, or the RPP zone, or both. So in our case, since we don't have meters and we don't have RPP, it's really quite simple. The vehicle's branded, done. You know not to enforce as long as it's parked in the allowable areas. So the real issue for parking enforcement is to know they can park in 90 minutes or not, but they can't park in a 30-minute zone. And so
20.
20
I think
minute.
we have 20s.
Right. So it's, in that sense, it's actually quite simple for parking enforcement staff to know what to do. It's just a policy decision on what we want to do.
well, this is for information only, and it seems that it has a positive, all the comments, they have been great, and I think a positive reception from this body. I
Sounds
think the
like
next
a good service for people, and I'd like to do whatever we can to facilitate it, and
so
unless we hear otherwise.
I'm going to discuss it with them and with the chief of police and fire department, and we're going to let you know what happened and let you know with the draft agreement that you sent.
Okay.
It seems that it's a very good program.
I would agree with that.
Thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate
you.
being here.
Thank you. So should we go back for the police report? Is that good? Thank you.
I'm not sure if I reported to you at your last meeting, but I have talked to the police chief about coming to a meeting in the near future to talk a little bit more about these trends. But in the meantime, I do have it updated through the end of 2017. This is the collisions per month. The top blue line are total collisions, and the solid line is the actual data, and the dotted line is a simple trend line. Obviously, it shows a little bit of a slight decline. The trend is a slight decline in total accidents. The grayish color is injury accidents, and that trend line is pretty even, averaging about 4 injury accidents per month. This is a scatter diagram of the bicycle and pedestrian collisions. The brownish color is the bicycle collisions that, and the solid, in this case, the solid line is the trend line. That's pretty steady at about 1 a month, but it jumps around, obviously, from month to month. And then the blue-colored square markers are the auto versus pedestrian, and unfortunately there we seem to be seeing a trend, particularly in the last few months, of a higher number of auto versus pedestrian accidents. So that's something for us all to note. This is the number of DUI arrests, and as with the first graph, the solid line is the actual data and the dotted line is the trend line, and it's obviously a trend line of a decrease in DUI arrests. And police chief can talk about some of the things that are contributing to that. And then the final is the number of citations, and again, trend line down per month.
This is traffic citations.
Moving?
Citations, moving citations, correct.
Okay.
The trend line is down, but it almost looks to me like if you started in July of 2016, you'd see a much flatter trend.
You're right. If you were to start in the last, certainly in the last year or so, it's pretty even.
Still a little bit down, but the sharpest downward movement was during the first half of 2016.
Yeah. And again, I don't want to speak for the chief, but I think he can talk a little bit about some of the trends in policing and the personnel mix and the grant programs that all sort of contribute to some of the, particularly on the traffic enforcement programs. There are some larger trends going on nationwide that this is apparently consistent with.
This is really good. Thank you. All right. We'll get back to 6-2 Albany Sidewalk Program.
So I just want to clarify that I'm not the staff person managing this project, but Rasu Engen is the engineer who's doing this in charge of this project. But he had family commitments tonight, and then he couldn't be here. I have been involved in the logistics, but he's the lead contact. So I'm just going to try to do my best here. Present slideshow, isn't it? Okay, so this is just a little bit of an agenda of this presentation. Basically, it's reviewing the criteria for prioritizing the repairs, the sidewalk repairs, development of sidewalk repair list based on the established criteria that the Traffic and Safety Commission developed last year, and presenting the first round repair list and map. Then basically this is a task list that will present the next steps as well, and the steps that we have, the tasks that we have achieved to this point, and the implementation process. So just a reminder, this is what the Traffic and Safety Commission approved as the prioritization criteria. We have a Group A, which is special needs, special access needs. And Group B is all the locations that are included in the priority sidewalk network described in the ATP. With those, there is a subset of groups, basically, is the groups that are 2 inches or more offset or structural failure, and the offset that is between 1/2 inch and 2 inches. That's a Group B, so of subset B. Then we have the Group C, which is the offset of more of 2 inches or structural failure that do not belong to the ATP. Group D is the offset of between 1/2 inch and 2 inches. And Group E would be special cases, which is part of a separate list. And Group F would be an offset that is less than 1/2 inch. And then we have ranking within each group. So using that criteria, we identified about 250 locations from the list, and they were evaluated and ranked. We discussed the locations with the city arborist to see if there are locations with trees and what kind of treatment we would do there. We removed 2 locations from the first round of repair as they were required to removal and they need more work, but they will be implemented in the next round or in the future.
Actually, the locations that required trees are getting put into the special category that, I forget what we called it, the R.
Group E.
Group E.
Special cases.
Yeah.
Special cases.
Special case.
Because there was a big issue with the Parks and Rec Commission about not wanting to take out trees and finding alternate means of dealing with it. And so, at least for the first couple rounds, when we come across something that we can't deal with root pruning or crown
Canopy.
thinning, we pulled it out and put it on the special list. So we got 2 of those.
And those were removed from this current list in round 1. So we have selected a reasonably sized project that resulted in 40 locations for an approximate cost of construction of $100,000. We sent letters to these 40 locations and notified them of this meeting. So here is basically the distribution between the groups. We have 5 locations in Group A, which is a special access. Then Group B, from the list that we had, there are 22 locations that include all of the Group B identified properties, and that gives us room to repair some of the Group B locations, which are 13 locations. Now, we'll keep on doing this assessment, and we're going to have more Group B1 locations for the future, because right now we're continuing with assessment right now. So we want to add to that.
A couple of points here. The Group B includes 2 things. One, like Aleida said, at least for the initial list, we cleared out the Group B1s, but some of the Group B2s are for clustering, because we looked at clustering to make sure we had, if we had 2 or next to each other and one was a B1, we took the B2 too. So and then we did blow through the first group of B1s. We since have, our intern has worked through the city very, very fast, so we have a much bigger list now than we started with. So we will get plenty more B1s.
So the problem areas keep on growing, which is, well, as expected. Yeah.
Yes.
So this is the list for the round 1. These are the 40 locations, and this is the map. The green corridors are the areas, the corridors identified in the ATP as pedestrian corridors, and the red parcels are the locations that the properties that we are going to improve the sidewalk. So it's basically just the sidewalk. So I can go back to this map later, but here's what we have as our tasks. We have completed the ranking. The arborist review of the locations has been completed, and we have a preliminary design completed as well. We still have to do the finalizing the construction design that we expect to be done in early February. And we compiled the bid package for City Council approval at the second meeting in February, and the construction between April and May. That's a very, ambitious schedule, but I think we can do it.
Just to be clear, we're not going to finish in April, May. We'll start in April and May.
Yeah.
And then work through our list. We also will start designing the second list.
The second round.
So the idea is, we have, as we saw in our CIP budget, we have plenty of money in our current year. We want to keep this process going. And we think we can, we worked through a lot of the bugs getting this first list out. So our idea is to turn around and start getting the second list or the second round and really start moving.
So the recommendation tonight is to approve the repair location list and authorize, make a recommendation to send it to the City Council in February. Any clarifications? We want to try to.
Can you
So
put the
any
map
questions?
back up?
Yeah.
So when we see red marks on the map that are on a street that's not highlighted, are those all Group A? Like,
Yes,
Yes.
I believe so. I
Yeah.
think,
There are a couple on this, yeah.
okay.
So I'm curious, so you said the interns has grown the list. Has the intern grown lists in B1 category?
yes.
Okay, yeah, B1.
B1.
One within the
Yeah.
network.
Good.
I think he's finished
I think he's finished.
with the
Yeah.
network. With the network.
All right.
And we're also looking at contracts with firms to come and survey it, and then that would, it looks like, I don't know exactly, they claim that it'll integrate well with our GIS system. We'll see if that data works, but that would be another thing that we're looking at.
So if we personally have concerns about an area that needs to go on the list, do we just talk to you?
Just call, email.
Okay, okay.
I can shoot you the contact.
Okay, good. Excellent.
So
Right.
the 13 of B1 is all of the B1 that was on your original list, right?
I think it was
Yes.
the original list, plus there was some additions.
Okay.
Um,
Now, the 22 in Group B2 is probably not all of Group B2.
No.
How many more are in Group B2 before the intern added?
I don't know.
We don't
So-
have that information. I mean,
Just for a sense, when we came in October, our list was somewhere in the 100 locations, and now we're up over 250 before the interns
Yeah.
adding to it. So the list is going to grow.
keeps on growing.
Okay, so you don't really have a sense of what fraction of Group B2 we're covering in this one chunk?
No, I imagine it's pretty small. Though.
Yes, it's because I think, from what I understand from Brazil, is that tries to concentrate on the big ones
Yeah.
and the accessible needs.
I guess to evaluate the groups, it might be helpful just to know how many total incidents do you detect in each group? And if one of the groups seems too big, maybe we should break it down more, or if one of the groups seems too small, maybe we should fold it in.
We can look at that. Well, one of the other things that we've done since this came to you, we engaged a contractor to do shaving up and down Solano. So the idea is we've gotten most of the ones that can be shaved, the ones that are below 2 inches, along Solano. So
So those were all in
Those
Group
were-
B2
they were Group B2s.
B2.
That were,
Yeah.
that you've dealt with in a different way.
yes, but not permanently.
At least it will buy some time. There were 25 locations we did with the shaving.
Okay. Well, we knew this list would keep changing. I mean, and guessed that might be large changes. But our plan at the time was to take the ones that we knew about because they weren't they weren't going to get fixed any other way, right? And attack them and then come right behind it with the ones that are B1s now from the intern, right? Okay. Any other questions from the commission?
I'll just say this is exciting to see. And
It's not a question.
Yeah, that's not a question.
is anybody surprised that I'm excited?
And is this questions or discussion time? Well, I don't know.
Why don't we move it on? All right.
Anybody else? Open it up for public comment?
I'll keep it pretty simple. I'm thrilled. Thank you very much for doing this work. I think it's going to be really transformative for the city, for the people that use sidewalks. I know one of the people who was very involved in strollers and rollers maybe a decade ago, she was in her time, probably her early 40s, and she took the Transbay bus to San Francisco, and she said, oh, no, I never walk on the sidewalks in the wintertime when I'm coming back from work. And I was like, wow. If you don't walk on the sidewalks at night, and you're reasonably young and fit, it's really a disaster for most people in the city. So it's going to make a huge difference. With 40 spots for about $100,000, and that kind of numbers you're throwing out, I mean, it's 250, it could go up to 400 or whatever. I mean, those are all going to be fixed within 3 years or something like that. So it's going to be pretty remarkable. So in terms of prioritization, yeah, it makes a difference in the short term, but probably not worth getting too caught up in it because they're all going to get cleaned up. Oh, and on the grinding, I just happened to stop by a neighbor's house, actually not on the Green Network, showing the thoroughness of the survey. And he said his daughter, I guess City of Albany Public Works employee or somebody knocked on their door and was like, oh yeah, we're gonna grind your sidewalk and smooth it out. And he was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to get a bill, and then he never got a bill, and so he's pretty thrilled. So happy constituents already. Thanks.
Great. Anyone else? Okay, back to us. We are to provide feedback to staff.
I thought of another question.
I think you can do that. I hope you can do that.
Did it turn out to be all basic sidewalks, or are any of them corners or corner cuts?
You mean curb ramps, or?
Thank you.
No, I think we've explicitly excluded redoing curb ramps from this because it gets into a lot of design issues, and so, no.
It will delay also the project. We want to start with round one immediately, so.
Well, and curb ramps are $15,000 to $20,000 a pop, and
And then those annoying people roaming the city criticizing your work. I know, yeah. No names.
Does the same hold true for curb and gutter also? So if it has displaced curb and gutter adjacent to the sidewalk, you're not touching it?
I think they're not so much the curb and gutter, and that's one thing that's come up in a couple cases where people asked for it, and I think that's something we haven't entirely worked out.
Okay.
It's not specifically discussed in the policy. The policy does allow us to do like driveways and things of that sort that are attached to the sidewalk. But yeah, so at least for this first couple of rounds,
Yeah. Okay.
kind of leaving it alone.
So if your intern sees problems in areas like that, are you collecting the data and putting it in group E, or are you just ignoring the problems and?
Well, so what our intern's doing is getting some basic data, and that gets us on the list, and then we've contracted with a small company to come out and survey each site, and we've developed a little plat, and that's where we pick up the real extents of it.
So if they see if the intern sees a problem that's in a curb ramp and what ends up happening with that report?
I'm not sure off the top of my head.
Because it sounds like that
Next
information
round,
is
Harry.
valuable,
Next round.
even if we can't do anything about it right
Yeah.
now.
Sure.
Yeah, so I'll talk to him and see how we can separate that. He's primarily just focused on, I see a offset or some sidewalk issue, so
Yeah, on the
I'm not sure
pedestrian
how much
path.
he's getting into the curb ramps and what he does with the curb ramp issues, if we see something in a curb
With-
ramp issue.
Curb and gutter too. The curb and gutter is that area. But the other company that we talked to, they will be able to capture that information. So
Okay.
with the geocoding, geolocator.
So feedback is? Great.
I would move that we approve the repair location list and recommend the city council authorize release of invitation to bid for the construction of sidewalk improvements.
I'll second that. Can I? Yeah, I can. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed? That passes.
I have a request. I was looking at the service request section on the website, and it doesn't specifically address sidewalks.
Yeah, there's some building out of that service requests that we need to do on the list of things that we need to do,
And the sidewalk section is a little out of date too, but you probably know that already.
as well as the PCI section and the sewer section.
Yeah, I don't care about this. That's it.
And that would be a good place to put a suggestion, attempt? Okay. Great. All right, so move to 6.3, review of the summary of comments received for San Pablo and Buchanan Pedestrian Improvement Project.
Right. So I included in your packet a summary of comments that we have received from the presentations we made to the different committees and commissions in the city. And we have not received a response from the consultant yet, or basically we'll receive it today, but we haven't had time to really go through each response. So in general, the presentation to the commission and committees was well received. People were enthusiastic about the project. This is for the San Pablo Avenue pedestrian improvements. And they offer a lot of ideas, particularly depending on the commission, but for instance, the Park and Rec had a lot of ideas on the gateway, garden gateway, in the plaza at Pierce. The Economic Development Commission offer comments on anything that would impact the businesses along San Pablo Avenue. And the Arts Committee interested in some placeholder for an art piece in the future. Not part of the project, but just in the future. So as you can see, there is a variety of comments in the Traffic and Safety Commission comments regarding location of crossings and moving it to the north side. One challenge on San Pablo Avenue, and I don't recall we emphasized it enough at the meeting when we presented this project, was that we don't have a storm drain substructure, so anything we do on San Pablo, bulb outs will actually exacerbate the problem of flooding. So it seems to me that in order to implement a true complete streets, we need the drainage component. Other than that, it would be a more like a quasi-complete street. Because it's not, but it's an investment of close to $1 million. And I don't know at this point if any granting agency will be able to give us that amount of money. Because usually the grants would be transportation funds, and usually transportation excludes any kind of utilities. So I'm not aware of anything right now. perhaps if we write the grant application in a way that in order to support complete streets improvements, we need this substructure, then maybe in that case. But right now, I'm still struggling with the issue. So any comments on the comments?
Can I speak to the thing you just spoke about? In terms of the Washington Avenue crossing and the idea of a two-way cycle track on the west side, I recently saw a picture of a cycle track that was made out of a bent steel sheet, so that it was hollow inside.
Could you send me that picture?
I need to find it, but I think the concept is fairly straightforward.
Okay.
There's an issue with driveway dips.
Well, the issue also is that it needs to be approved by Caltrans.
Yeah,
So that's
understand? Yeah,
it's
yeah.
a huge one.
Yeah. We'll talk about that later.
Yeah. Okay.
Couple questions. I think I asked this last time, but there's no way to design the bus bulbs or the ped bulbs without changing the drainage, like trench drains or any type of solution where the drainage stays at the back of the bulb?
You have it on. It's on. It's on.
I think when we talked with the consultants about that, the flow is
Significant.
and
Okay.
since it's a Caltrans facility, they have their storm design requirements that are pretty large, so I think
Yeah.
that makes it very, very difficult.
Got it. Okay. And then my other question was, I went through these pretty quickly. Were there any that contradicted each other from the different commissions? I didn't think there were, but started getting confused where they approved crosswalks in some locations and others. And I don't know if traffic and safety approved anything different, but does it seem like everything's consistent at least?
Can you say the number?
Yeah, I saw some economic development, move crosswalk to the north at Brighton and San Pablo. I think that's consistent.
I think all of them, what I remember, if I should be reflected, is that everybody wanted to the north.
The north, right?
Yeah. And that was very consistent throughout the people who requested it to the north. So,
There was one interesting item in the economic development about moving the cycle track, the Washington dogleg cycle track, to the east side of San Pablo.
Right.
I think that's something that we never
That is different.
considered, so I don't know if it's inconsistent with our input or just.
they didn't seem to really care about the loss of parking. If I remember correctly, some people were divided in that. So they said, well, we're gonna lose 5 parking spaces in the areas where there's restaurants and
So are you saying that we chose the west side in order to avoid?
parking
parking
lots?
spaces.
Yeah, and then because of the nature of the businesses on the west side.
They're mostly big driveways. and
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas the other side, the east side, has the restaurants and more pedestrian activity. More people might gather on the sidewalks, and I don't know. And then I guess they depend more on the parking available in front of there.
Right, but it sounds like the Economic Development Commission
opposite.
said that they wanted
Yeah.
the cycle track on the east side, so.
That's what I'm saying. So that was it was a little bit divided. One person was saying no, the businesses, the mom and dad businesses need the parking in front of the, and then it was, well, I said I can write it and see what it is.
So we haven't really, we haven't seen a design for what it would look like.
No,
on the
we
east
haven't.
side, and we're not
It might
to make a judgment
right.
about that yet, but
Right.
it's an interesting idea.
It's an interesting idea because of the crossing on one basically.
Wouldn't require adding a Hawks.
Yeah, that's right. Just one crossing, and there is a solution for that. Just by the way, the hawk could be coordinated with the signal. So, that's.
I wanted to ask about the San Pablo and Brighton. I think there's more than one comment in here about moving the crosswalk to the north side, but at the time when we discussed it, the consultants told us at the meeting that there were physical conditions that would make that impossible, and
Right. So,
afterwards,
and I'm
we
gonna.
had a little private discussion about questioning that. Do you have an answer?
Yeah,
on that?
I submitted your email, Preston's email, or your email, I think it was, to them when you guys went to measure. So I sent it to them. They, as I said, just 20 minutes before this meeting, I received the response. So I didn't have time to review it, but they have an answer for all of the comments that you have there. So Mark, Jeff, and I will discuss this next week, and we want to determine what to do with, we have to make decisions with this project. So
It's just that the specific measurements that Preston and I sent to you aren't detailed in this document. Like the
Because I
request to
said-
move it to the north side is
Yeah.
mentioned, but we already requested that, and they said, no, we can't. And our follow-up request is, but wait a minute, we did these measurements, and it doesn't seem consistent with what we thought you were telling us. So we just need to kind of conclude that conversation.
that's right. So, and they, hopefully they, as I said, I haven't reviewed the comments, but they have your email. And then I asked them to actually please address the email in the comments.
Okay, great.
So,
So one thought on the bulb outs issue for San Pablo. In terms of finding grants, one thing it might be worth keeping an eye out for is something that if we were to incorporate bioswales in the bulb outs,
yeah.
that we might,
I'm sorry, incorporate what?
bioswales?
Bioswales, thank you.
So essentially, the bulb out becomes a retention basin, water filtration for water quality. Usually you attach that to a storm drain also, but there's the possibility that if we incorporate the bioswale as an element, we might get enough money to add the storm drain.
But who would be the granting agency there? How?
I'm not entirely sure. That's,
Because I requested the bioswales, and the problem is that we don't have the sort of structure.
right, yeah. So whether there's any grants that would fund a storm drain in order to allow installation of a bioswale, I'm not sure. So it's a long shot, but that would be the one thing that comes to mind to kind of look and see if there are any. I don't know if there are.
Yeah, an idea I had is that basically tying the implementation of complete streets features to the implementation of a pipeline, a storm drain system on San Pablo Avenue. We cannot do it truly if we don't have that. So in that way, maybe the grant will be able to fund.
Exactly, because the volume of water flow that I've seen in significant rain events there, you'd pretty much have to have a trench drain the width of the entire
Yes.
bulb out to do it. So it'd be tough.
Yeah.
Any other? So if the storm drain is, I don't want it to be a barrier. I mean, I like these creative ideas, but let's say it is the barrier. Does it prevent us from doing complete street-like improvements that we have planned here? Does it prevent us from going out for grants if it doesn't totally qualify as a complete streets?
Well, usually what you saw in the 35% is what we can do. I mean, granted, we could move the crosswalk to the north side and it'd be the same thing, but there's going to be flooding. There's going to be a lot of flooding, especially because the bulb outs will make it worse.
Right.
And yeah, we cannot use the water for bioswales because we don't have the system.
I mean, if we had more permeable soils,
Yeah.
you could do one that's not connected to a storm drain, but there's so much clay that the water just won't percolate.
Yeah, that's another. Thank you for reminding that. That's true. Any ideas?
Interesting.
If it helps the commission understand the scope of the drainage problem, I have like a 2-second video that I could
Yeah.
play real quick.
That'd be great.
Where do you get these from?
I was sitting in my car waiting for the light to change.
Wow.
This is at the Mallard, Club Mallard, in front of the Club Mallard on January 8th, I think. So you can see it's a fair amount of, this wasn't a particularly, it was a heavy rain day, but it wasn't extraordinary.
I've definitely seen worse than this.
Yeah.
I think one of the challenges is that since it is a Caltrans facility, they sort of own the approval of the storm drain design, and they're not going to let you degrade it one bit. And that's, you know, a gutter can flow a lot of water.
So what about, I don't know the name of this, what about the longer-term project for the whole San Pablo?
Corridor study?
Yeah, I mean,
Multimodal.
The Alameda County is doing?
will they have to address this in that?
Probably in the second phase, I would say.
So,
Maybe that's a, yeah.
I mean, are there things that we can do with that in mind? I don't know. Can we actually do something and,
Actually, before the meeting with my bosses, I was going to try to find out what strategies
yeah,
we could tackle, actually,
yeah.
to solve this problem.
Because it's not only ours. If it's the corridors, Caltrans, they need to help us with this some, I would think. You know, in the long run.
They might have the same problem because this corridor study is going all the way to Richmond.
Right,
They might have the same problem in Richmond or,
right. I mean, there's too many things that we do need to do to make it better in the shorter run, too.
we'll get back, we'll bring back to you the responses and maybe the responses from the consultants in February. And some the update design in March or April, whenever it is. So that's what we wanted to do. So unfortunately, the responses did not make it in time for this meeting.
So, do you have everything you need from us? then?
We haven't
Well,
had
public-
public comment, right?
Oh, I am so sorry. Public comment.
Until the responses come back, there's not much to comment.
Right. Okay.
If you think we missed something that you made a comment
that's true,
on,
yeah.
do let us know. You don't necessarily have to read through all of it right now, but do let us know if there was something that you expected us to address in the 35% stage.
I thought it was pretty, it was like reading that meeting again. I thought it was good. Okay,
Thank you. So.
thank you. Moving along to 6.4, selection of chair and vice chair. So, this is a good part of the meeting for me.
Nominations.
So I've really enjoyed it, but,
Has everybody been chair recently?
In the last 5 years, probably.
Last 5 years? Yeah, because I think it's been 5 years since I was chair.
I nominate Ken.
I second. Can we do that?
Do I have to behave? I'm always behaving. I would love to be chair.
Do we vote on that first, and then?
Sure.
Can we open that up for a vote? All who say aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Any nays? No? Ken,
Congratulations.
Thank you.
the next chair.
Who made the second? I'm sorry.
I did.
Susan.
She's eager.
Vice chair.
Does that mean that you now elect the?
Would you, it's whenever you would want to turn over the meeting.
Well, I can. Is there anyone interested in vice chair? Or nominating for vice chair?
I don't mind. I'm fine with being vice chair.
I nominate Robert.
There you go.
Second it.
All in favor of Robert being vice chair?
Aye.
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 All
Who
opposed?
second?
Robert's vice chair.
Sounds good.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations to both of you.
Are you going to hand the meeting over?
Would you like to take over?
I'd be happy to.
Do you need to move?
Thank you very much
or- Thank you.
for your service.
Thank you.
You know, 1 out of 9 isn't bad, right?
That's right.
For challenges. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's a learning experience.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
It has been.
Let's hope we don't have another one of those learning experiences soon. So let's move on to item number 7. And
Yeah. We would like to move 7.5 up because he's a little bit sick and we want him to,
My daughter's home alone, so.
we want him to go home.
let's do 7.5.
Thank you. I was like, oh, man. They just put on.
You know, it's Jeff's third meeting this week. You know. Okay.
I had study session too.
I can do it.
All right. So this is just a quick update of where we are on our undergrounding project. So by and large, it's moving along. We're kind of getting to the end. I know people are very tired of it, but it is moving on. Overall, we're about 75% here. Why don't you go back to the beginning?
Just to, yeah.
Yeah, because these are just a couple slides on some very specific issues. Wanted to
Just signal.
point out. We're about 75% of the overall project, so we are nearing the end. The work that's been completed along the south side, it's essentially done. The work that's remaining is the street work, the paving work, the striping work that's going to be delayed to the end, but by and large, the sidewalks are in place and everything is complete. On the north side, the electrical contractor has completed all the joint trench work, so all the pipes are in the ground and they're going through the proof testing with the utility companies, so they buy off on it and then they can start moving into the rest of the surface improvements. Right now, we're looking at that starting the 12th of February, and then that would proceed. The contractor thinks he can get most of the blocks done, all the sidewalks, the curb and gutter in place by the first week of March. And then he would be looking to do a substantial completion late March, early April, and some of that's dependent on the weather. One of the issues we're running into is once you start taking out the curb and gutter, and then it rains, all that water then goes into your excavation, and then you have to pump it out and dry it out, and it becomes much, much, much more of a struggle. We're going to try to manage it so that he's going to bring on extra crews so that we can do it as a block at a time, so he's not going to open up the whole thing like he did on the south side, which I think will be a benefit. And then,
Okay.
I'll tell you. We're good. We're good. The couple things as the project's completing, we have the new light poles will be one of the last things that are installed. And then we're going to go into a period where PG&E is going to start installing their lines. So the way the process goes, the poles might be there for another year and a half, but PG&E will take off their lines, heat up their system, which then will heat up the new light poles. Then AT&T will come and take out their lines, and then Comcast will take out their lines, and then I think the last person out will come and take out all the poles. And where there are poles right now, we've left knockouts where it's a real thin layer of concrete. The last company who takes out the poles will then come in and replace all those flags of concrete. And that could be, they've told us that it could be up to 18 months after the project's complete. And I don't think we have a lot of control over that schedule. But it'll be largely done. And I imagine we're going to have to do some filler work, like I think one of the more complicated sites is, as Ken pointed out, at the Arco station, where it looks a little funky there, but there's a guy wire for one of the telephone poles or the power poles, and once that's taken out, they have to finish pouring a section of the driveway apron going in there, and that'll clean it up. So we might have to step in and fill in some of those gaps.
It actually looks a lot better and is much safer with that planter box there. So
Yeah,
it's a minor issue.
It's coming together, but I think there's going to be a lot of those. I think where where we have a pole, we're going to have to go in and maybe fill in the gap on our own. So we have had a couple construction issues. I think most of you have heard some of the bicycle issues that have gone on. We are trying to manage that, and we have a couple things that we're going to implement here. One, we have some more signage that's going to go up to make it very clear that bicycles can use the full lane. And now that the Hawk Single's open, we're going to put up a detour to detour people, get the bicycles as much as we can outside of the construction zone and take them down Dartmouth. So I think we know it's a challenge, the contractor knows it's a challenge, and it's just one of these things we're trying to do. It's a challenging site, so hopefully these will help alleviate the situation. Our other construction issue, and this, now we can go. We've run into a little bit of an issue with East Bay mud. So the contract calls for relocation 2 hydrants, one at Adams and then one at Stanage. And I have a picture here at Adams.
Kains. Kains? Kains.
Damn, I was thinking. I have, you know what? I have that the Adams and Kains project stuck in my head, and I yeah. What am I? Yeah. Anyways, Kains. The hydrant is right at right in the curb ramp, and we've been told by East Bay Mud that they are at least 6 months out to relocate it. So we have a little bit of a question of struggle of how we're going to handle this. So we haven't settled on any one option yet, and I just wanted to kind of be upfront. This is one option is to leave it where it is until East Bay Mud and finish all the work around it, leave a flag there. When East Bay Mud comes in, moves it, then we'll come in and fill the flag. What that would do is delay the opening of that curb ramp until East Bay Mud comes and does their work. The other option, which still has a lead time, and I'm not sure how that lines up, but to do a temporary relocation where instead of, do you have a clicker of some sort?
I've got one. Yes, I do. Don't look into it.
Not right, yeah. No, so the plans call for moving it to the east here, to the new planter box. So the other option would be moving it along the same, and the issue that it's causing East Bay Mud is that this is viewed as a new hydrant, which goes through their engineering department, which goes through their whole process and gets on a schedule, and that's, it seems like it's always 6 months out. If the other option would be to temporarily relocate it along the same alignment, so we just move it straight back into the grass area. That might work. There's some issues here because there's conduits that go through here that might conflict with us in profile, and it's an added cost. And there's a potential schedule issue. We haven't gotten all the details from East Bay Mud yet, but those are the 2 options that we're considering.
So that's someone's property?
Yeah, that would be in someone's property.
Oh.
Well,
It's within the
right of way.
It's still within the right of way.
You keep on back a sidewalk. Okay.
Right.
It's
It'd be
their
about like-
lawn, but it's
Yeah.
the right of way.
Right. I know our fire department does not like this option because then you're running hoses across, pedestrian paths and things of that sort. So anyways, I wanted to at least get this issue on your guys' radar.
If the curb cut is, go ahead. If the curb cut is closed, do people have the option of crossing Kains and then crossing?
Is there a parallel crosswalk at the intersection? Or intersections?
Yeah, I think it is.
I think there might be.
Yeah, I think it is.
So it's a short distance out of the way for people walking.
Right. And the other thing I was thinking, we can post this new service rep's phone number on it. Say, if this bothers you, call this number.
That could be on the explanation sign.
Well, East Bay Mud.
Yeah.
And is it left in a condition where people with great mobility and not such great respect for for standards would just walk around the
Yes.
flag and cross anyway?
Yes, that's what would happen. But the accessibility piece of it would not be available until.
Did we not anticipate the long lead time for the hydrant relocation?
I'm still trying to figure all that out. What happened? I think it was a combination of things. We had staff turnover, plus East Bay Mud pulled out of the project, and I think they were helping us with those parts of it. And then if you start talking to East Bay Mud and they say, oh yeah, this is a relocation and it's blah blah blah, then you look at it. Oh wait a minute, this is a new business, and so.
Sure.
It probably could have been done better, but
And another question is, will the contractor still be on board if this is like a 6-month delay for?
so this is one where they'll complete all the work around it, and
So
then
you'd have
we'll
to bring
leave a
another-
flag, and we'll have to come back and replace that flag of concrete,
Okay, so you'd have to get another bid out or something like
or
that.
we'd do it ourselves.
Do it yourselves. Okay.
So are both of these pictures at Kains?
This is Kains, and then we'll go to the next one. Shows
I'm looking at Street View now, and as you can see at Stanage, there's a crosswalk only on one side of the street. I don't know what happens does that continue in the new? At Stanage, there's a crosswalk on the west side of the street. So actually, you wouldn't cross here
we don't.
anyway.
No.
Right now, there will be a crosswalk
There will
here
be.
later. There is not
Yeah.
one now.
Yeah.
See,
Correct.
but there will be one on both sides, so.
I believe so.
Okay.
They're not used to it now. Nobody's used to it.
Right, so that's actually a good point, where at Stanage, we're not taking anything away.
Yeah.
At Kains, we are taking something away, because,
But at Kains, the other crosswalk is going to be the one with the refuge. So it's the one
Yeah,
that we
on
want
the
to
west
encourage
side.
people to use anyway.
fair enough.
Oh, there you go.
All right.
So go to another one here.
And then the next thing, we had a couple changes. We have added 5 more curb ramps to the project. As you know, the surface improvements stopped at Cornell. And through our construction management, and I thought Chris, who is managing our project for us, he had band practice. He's much cooler than all of us. He was going to stop by, but I guess he's having too much fun. They've worked with the utility companies and saved them a lot of money, and I know this was one of the struggles we had during design, is getting them to pay for restoration costs. And so we've gotten them to pay for curb ramps, or at least the agreement right now is for them to pay for curb ramps at Marin and Talbot, the south side and the northwest side, and then at Evelyn, and this is Evelyn on the south side. So I think that's a big win for the city. This is probably about, with design services in, it's probably 60, 70, maybe $80,000 worth of work that's added to the project, which is great. The
Now,
next,
he got that how, again, to explain that?
so really what we've done is save them a tremendous amount of money through the project by, it's a unit quantity job, by condensing things and making things shorter and really working with the contractor on the quantity. So, it's been a good relationship, and they're feeling like this is a good project for them. And so they're being, it's just building the relationships in the field. I think a lot of times on these projects you get away from the office people and you get people out in the field, and they can kind of work things through a little better. And if you have good relationships, you can get these things done. And both Chris as well as our construction manager from Zune Engineering have done a tremendous job in working with the utility companies. And then we have,
That is awesome, by the way.
I was very surprised. And then this is at Marin and Talbot. And we just, the one that's not constructed there is on the northwest side. And that's the design we've they were still finalizing. One of the drivers were also, that's a horrible drainage issue too. There's a bunch of collapsed pipes that I think we're going to be able to get fixed as well. And then I have some pictures of that. Right now, what we have in the contract would be them just, you see the upper left picture, it would just replace in kind. And so now they're going to rip the whole thing out and do the curb ramp, and we can fit the bidirectional curb ramps in there, and so it'll be really nice. And then there's pictures there of the completed south side. And that's all I had.
Great. Any questions? Further questions? Comments?
Just speaking for myself, it doesn't seem worth doing the temporary hydrant replace movement. I mean, it's only 6 months.
Yeah, and that was our thought, especially if it's going to take us another 2, maybe 3 months to really wrap up the project. So,
Any disagreements with that here? Thank you for all the work, and
Thank
it's
you
great to
for-
see this come to fruition. And
After like 6 years?
yeah,
all right. Well,
Like with the cherry on top, right? I mean, that's pretty amazing. I'm
Yeah.
impressed.
When they told me it will take minimum 5 years, I wouldn't be. I didn't believe the PG&E. No, you gotta be kidding. I said, oh no.
Great.
Thank you.
thank you. And thank you, Jeff, for moving me up to. I need to.
We have enough caffeine here in the building already, so you can go now.
oh, is that the key? Okay.
Off and then you can go home.
Office policy.
So does that take us to 7-1 then?
Yes, back to 7-1. This is just an update on the consultant selection process for the Solano Avenue Complete Streets project. Commissioner Del Rosario participated in the selection process in the interviews, and he can give you more details. But to summarize, we be preparing a recommendation to the City Council to select the firm of Tool Design Group. The acronym you'll see on this organization, which is TDG, and they have partnered with Opticos. I guess it's just Opticos is the name of their company. It's a Berkeley-based urban design firm. A former commissioner, John Mickey, is part of that firm and will be working on the project. Tool is a national firm. I think they have about a dozen offices, including a relatively new Berkeley office. And so it will be, although it's a large national firm, it will have a good local presence. It's always nice to have a consultant who's a 5 or 10 minute walk or bike ride or drive or whatever. Just makes it easier logistically for things. And I don't know if Robert wants to add to it. We got a total of 8 proposals. All of them were excellent. Interviewed 4 firms. I know it was a difficult decision for the selection committee because everybody did a really nice job.
Yeah, all 4 firms that we interviewed seemed like they'd be well qualified. We were really impressed with the project manager that Tool brought forward, and that really became the deciding factor. Fareed, I think Brooke is on the Hearst project, correct? Hearst Avenue?
She was, I don't.
Oh, maybe she's not. That's
Yeah,
right,
no,
she was.
We've worked with her before, and she's
Yeah.
very good.
Seemed very competent. And the fact that, they had a couple of folks that were local, so understood Solano Avenue very well. I think that really put over the edge for Tool.
So the recommendation, the contract will be going to the city council. It may be the next council meeting. I haven't reviewed that, but one of the February meetings of the consulting contract. And once that is approved, we'll gear up that planning process. It'll be really exciting.
Is the planning process associated with any one particular commission, or is it sort of a multi-commission process, or how will that process go?
Yeah, I think when we get to that point, I'd like to have, it's a team effort, so it would be both Aleda and I and Ann Hirsch, who's our planning and building manager. Traffic and Safety Commission will be very involved, but others as well. Solano Avenue is a multi-disciplinary problem, really. There's obviously a transportation part of it, but there's also an urban design and economic development. The council's made it clear that they're interested in a strong public art presence. It also interconnects with our parks and the Loney Greenway, and so it's got a little bit of everything. It's going to have to be a multi-member team effort, both at the staff level and at policymaker level.
Isn't it like the other complete streets? Would it be similar?
To some degree, it'll be similar, but it's a different street.
Yeah.
It's with a different set of inadequacies for complete transportation. But there are some similarities, like this San Pablo. Our partner in this is the Local Government Commission, which is a nonprofit based in the Sacramento area, and they do a lot of these. They partner with a lot of municipalities to help prepare these complete street studies, and we've got a good relationship with them. Worked on a couple different things with them now.
I live within 500 feet of Solano Avenue in this area, so I'll have to have an offline conversation about how that'll work. And
That's a good point. We'll have to sort that out
Yeah.
and understand whether or not there would potentially be conflicts of interest for commissioners. You know, a lot of people live within 500 feet of
Yeah,
Solano Avenue, so
yeah.
we'll have to think through that.
Great, thank you. 7.2, update on the Kains-Adams bicycle and traffic calming.
So, well, on December 4th, 2017, the City Council approved a motion requesting the Traffic and Safety Commission to develop a recommendation for a pilot program of the project with a timeline and metrics, including research and parking options, conferring with the Orientation Center for the Blind regarding a bridge over Cerrito Creek, in consultation with city public safety departments. So this basically we're going to be processed through this body. We have talked to the Parisi, oh my gosh, it's just like, yeah, Parisi and Associates to give us a scope, a proposal for a scope to develop a pilot project, and we will be bringing it back to this commission for recommendation to council for approval of the process. That's in the future, maybe February, I would say.
Yeah, I think this will be a major work item for you over the next few months, probably. We haven't set a time when exactly we'll bring it back to you, but Aleda has been really good about getting the contract to me, and I haven't been so good about getting it back to her. So the ball's in my court to get it done.
All right, questions?
So what would a pilot project look like? Would it be one block of treatment on each street?
No, I think it's most likely, from what I've seen in the proposal, I think it's going to be the whole corridor. I think that would be
But more temporary treatments or
temporary treatments, so.
something? Yeah.
But you'll have the point of bringing it to you is for you to review those ideas with the consultant and comment on them and engage the community on those.
But the intent of the pilot was for city council to measure its benefits and then also make adjustments or take it out if they felt like it was
Yes.
not a success. Okay.
That's correct.
Other questions? Public comment? Comments? If it's coming back in February, I don't know when you're going to have your discussions as requested by the City Council with the first responders, with police and fire, but that might be a good nexus for having the police department here at a particular meeting.
Good point.
Yeah, good point. Yeah.
Thank you. That's a really good idea.
And that would concretely show the city council that we have fulfilled that portion of their directive. Okay. Seeing nobody clamoring to talk, I think we'll go on to the next one. This is 7.3, update on the Gilman Interchange project.
Yes. We're spending a fair amount of time working on this, participating in a couple of different series of meetings with the Alameda County Transportation Commission and colleagues in the city of Berkeley to help provide guidance on the design of this project. Upcoming, I guess it's week after next, February 7th, here during the day at 10 a.m. on February 7th, there'll be a public meeting that's oriented towards outreach to businesses that will be affected by the project, both Albany and Berkeley businesses. As was been discussed several months ago, the proposed design does affect circulation in a couple of areas, particularly for the city of Albany's perspective. The turn from Gilman to East Shore northbound will have to be modified, and there's probably need to have it route through 2nd Street and Harrison by the series of public storage facilities and the Berkeley transfer facility. So we need some business engagement on that, and there are also some changes on the south side of Gilman. There also have been a series of discussions, ongoing discussions about pedestrian overcrossings to get people from the east side of the freeway, both in Albany and Berkeley, to Bay Trail and to the Tom Bates playing fields. And so that's an ongoing discussion as well. And that's probably not going to be the emphasis of the meeting on the 7th, although it's a public meeting and where it goes is where it goes. But what we are planning to have tentatively is a presentation to the city council. And in looking at this agenda, I realized that there's a mistake because February 19th is a holiday. So it's actually, the council meeting is actually on February 20th. That's still a tentative date, one way or the other. But depending on how the meeting with businesses goes and how the design work goes, there very likely could be a presentation on February 20th to the city council that would address both issues with a particular emphasis on implications for Albany, and then there will be a similar presentation to the city of Berkeley's Transportation Commission at a future date as well. We'll be able to come back to the commission probably at your next meeting with more details and some graphics and so forth that are nailed down, that are ready for community input and review.
Any questions?
Quick one. Are the businesses in Albany that are particularly concerned with this the ones along East Shore? Is that?
Well, we'll find out how concerned they are. But they would be, right, if you're a business on East Shore and if your customers or employees customarily say come down Gilman and turn right on East Shore, they'll have a different route into that shopping area.
Right.
And that's a very important shopping area for the city. It's kind of actually in terms of sales tax generation for city government.
Pretty high.
It's the most important shopping district in the city.
Yeah.
I think of San Pablo and Solano as being
Right.
really
That
important.
makes sense. Yeah.
And from a community perspective, it is, but from dollars and cents
Big
to
dollars. Yeah.
yeah, Target and the
Toyota.
Berkeley Toyota in particular, and some of the building supply
Right.
They
Makes sense.
generate a lot of money to us. So.
The only other Albany business would be the racetrack.
Okay.
There'll be modifications into the entrance of the Golden Gate Fields stables area in particular, which is important to their day-to-day operations.
Public comment? Assuming we're done up here. Okay.
So I can say a bit about the active transportation overpass. I've been involved with a work group at Alameda CTC along with Fareed, looking at the alignment of that overpass and sort of come down to two different options, either the south, which is probably the option that you've seen, sometimes called the Southern U, and then a northern option. The northern option would also start from Gilman, as it stands now. The main advantage of that option is it would be in a location where it could be extended by an overpass over the railroad, say in the future, to connect directly to Cordonesis Creek or to Harrison, so that people didn't have to come down Gilman. It's a soft estimate now, it'd be $5 to $6 million more to build that one without the railroad overcrossing, just to build it, because it's a longer crossing. And the number of motor vehicles that would be crossing the cycle track on Gilman at 2nd Street would be greater on the north side than on the south side. So you're really taking something that's more expensive in the short term, has more conflicts, not dramatically more conflicts, but more conflicts, for the benefit of a much better facility in the long term, but uncertain whether you get that facility or not, because you have to come up with the funding and make it happen.
And the space.
Yeah, in the space, yeah. So, although Councilmember Mass had an interesting idea, which actually had quite an impact, which was to bring that overcrossing down Harrison instead of down the creek, which would avoid the wetland issues. It does have the problem that goes right through Berkeley's property. So Berkeley owns all the property between 2nd and the railroad track all the way up to the creek. However, they are redesigning that entire property. So in theory, there'd be the potential for them to actually take something like this into consideration, the redesign. I don't know if Berkeley will do that or not. The benefit, we're trying to figure out how to quantify what is the benefit in terms of additional ridership of a northern alignment that doesn't require people to go down Gilman. The main rub on Gilman is, even if it has a two-way cycle track, which would be planned, the intersections at East Shore Highway and at 2nd Street cannot be controlled by a signal because of roundabout operations, as I understand it. We'll be talking about that more at the next meeting. So the question is, what percentage of people who would ride if they didn't have to cross those intersections are going to decide not to ride if it crosses those intersections? And then that gives you your benefit of maintaining that long-term option. For perspective, those two intersections will be essentially the worst intersections you'd be able to ride from the Greenway, all the way up in Richmond or all the way up in Berkeley. And you'd be able to ride, go down Dartmouth, cross the New Hawk, go down Cordonesis Creek, and those two intersections would be the worst intersections on your whole ride. So it's not insignificant, but on the other hand, it's more money to go to the north. So it's a tough decision, I think, and we're trying to figure out how to get more data that actually discriminates between the southern and the northern overcrossing in terms of ridership projection, use projection, to actually make a sort of decision that's based on some data rather than just anecdotes and intuition. So anyway, there we go. Is that a reasonable representation, you think?
I think quite good, and I just want to add that Preston's involvement has really been very helpful in the process. In addition to looking at the long-term prospects and selecting between north and south overcrossings, really has led to, I think, enhancement of the base project in a lot of ways. So even the immediate project interim, if you want to think of it as an interim, will be substantially improved based on a lot of the conversations that Preston started with the group. So thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. And then Fareed brought in Karen, and I'm sorry, I don't know her last name, but Perolik, who's a transportation commissioner from Berkeley, who's been really helpful as well, because she actually, unlike me, where it's all sort of theory, I do ride that corridor, but because of how I ride, a lot of this is theoretical in my mind, thinking about how somebody who's not maybe as risk-taking as I am would ride. She actually has children that she rides down there with to the fields, and so she's got, real, right now, interface, so she can really talk to it from real, tangible, experiential perspective. So that was great that she came in. Thanks.
Fabulous. That seems to be the update. Any other comments before we move on? Great. 7.4 is an update on Lime Bike.
So Lime Bike, the dockless system is gonna start its deploying its service here, the bicycles in Albany next Tuesday, in coordination with the city of El Cerrito. The city of El Cerrito has a launch ceremony at 4 p.m. on Tuesday, January 30th at City Hall. We also are going to have some kind of information or some kind of, because it's today that we're going to do
I don't have,
information on the website, I think. More details?
I'm sure we'll have some more information if there are questions. To give you a little bit of context, there is no agreement with Lime. We looked through our encroachment permit municipal code requirements to determine that we don't have any regulatory authority over this. It's a bicycle. You can park a bicycle as long as you park it in a responsible manner, or like any bicycle, they can operate their business. So we're going forward without any form of agreement, but we do have appears to be a good working relationship and an understanding that if there are issues, they'll work with us on it. And as Leda mentioned, there will be a kickoff session and event in El Cerrito, and we have begun brainstorming ideas of whether or how we can do something in Albany to bring attention to it as a way of getting around.
One piece of information to share on top of that is relative to the city of Berkeley, which under the Berkeley, I forget if it's the charter or just the municipal code, has a requirement that anyone who's offering transportation services within the city of Berkeley needs a franchise agreement. So while Albany may not have that requirement, Berkeley does, and there has been communication from the city attorney to Lime Bike regarding that in Berkeley, saying you would need a franchise agreement, and by the way, because of the agreement with Motivate and MTC to operate the bike share that we do have in Berkeley and Oakland currently, there's also an exclusivity clause in that somehow Lime Bike would have to figure out both how to get the franchise agreement and not be in conflict with that exclusivity agreement in order to operate in Berkeley. So.
But you have jump bikes between the UC Village and the university.
Yeah, and that's, they did not contact the city. And as long as they only park their bikes in UC Village and on the Berkeley campus, the pass-through hasn't risen to the point of being a major conflict yet. I'm going to try not to cause any waves on that. But yeah, it is an agreement where their endpoints of a trip have to be in one of those two locations.
The HomeZone.
Yeah, the HomeZone issue.
It's the same presentation, right?
Yeah. These turn into some really interesting conversations and strategies of how do you manage these things. But anyway.
So does Alameda have an agreement?
Alameda
has an
does have
agreement.
So
for
were they able to put some
Alameda.
regulations and stipulations in there? Because
Well, I do have a copy of the agreement, and actually, I tried to edit that agreement for us, but I think Jeff had the idea of not having an agreement.
So, I mean, I think overall it is a really good idea. It's similar to gig, except you're on a bike, which is better. But I think there's stories. There's lots of stories that you can read about the decentralized bike shares, where they'll just put thousands, right, in larger cities, of course, in the U.S. And then you'll hear lots of stories of bikes just being left everywhere. And I think I've heard in Alameda, I heard bikes were left on the Fruitvale BART station up there. And then I think the other piece that was a concern for me was there's some data being collected, right, from these bikes, GPS equipped. So there's data being collected, so similar to your rideshare companies, that data is not going to be shared with the cities, I don't think.
Right, they'll share data with us.
They will share?
Yeah, they will share some data on statistics, usage, trips, general data.
Oh, we'll have
that.
O&D type of information?
Yeah.
O&D data? Well, that's good. That's good if we get that.
I've seen a picture of a Lime Bike on top of a bus stop, a bus shelter.
Yeah,
There are lots of pictures on the internet of,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
kind of
I mean, I
you
don't,
can stack on top of each other and that kind of thing.
I don't think we'll have that magnitude of problems here in Albany,
hope not. Yeah.
but it is something that other cities are definitely concerned about and said, well, wait a second, we should step in here and put a little bit of regulation on this.
We may need to do that, and I think it was more, let's give the service the benefit of the doubt, and if we have to get into a regulatory mode, if it becomes a public nuisance, then we've got regulatory authority and we can do a bunch of things. But if it goes well, then great. We're in a place where we can just, you know, if there's a particular problem, there's phone numbers that we'll have, and they're actually apparently going to be on the bikes, where if somebody dumps a bike in your front yard and you don't like it, you can call the 800 number or whatever, and somebody will come out within a certain number of hours and move the bicycle for you. So hopefully that will work. If it doesn't, and in the meantime, if Ford Go Bike wants, and which we do hope they come this way, and if they need some sort of an agreement with us, which they probably will, because they do have physical improvements in the public right of way, then we can enter into an agreement with them as they've been doing with other communities. So trying to have it both ways, I guess, a little bit.
Do you know how many bikes for the area?
Ford Go Bike, you mean?
No, the Lime bikes.
The Lime bikes? No.
I wouldn't be
How many what
surprised
for the
if they
area?
make it.
No, how many bikes are they going to have?
How many?
Did they say? I don't remember exactly what they said.
I would expect that they kind of, they'll put a lot out just to make a visual presence right at the beginning.
Splash.
Yeah, and you know, obviously they don't want the bikes sitting here and not being used as like the good car. Their financial interest is to have people riding their bikes. So if they're not, after a while, if they're not being used, I would expect to see fewer of them around. But we'll
How
see.
does it work? There's some number that unlocks it?
Yeah, you have an app
I have
that,
an app on your
that
phone.
I guess it's Bluetooth or something that will unlock. It's a lock that's integrated into the frame, and it snaps open and snaps closed when you're done.
Okay.
So when you looked at the agreement that Alameda has with Lime Bike, did anything jump out at you as a useful clause that you wished we could apply here in Albany, or?
Well, I took a look at it.
No, I looked at it too. No, I think
We can live without all
I
of
think
it,
we can,
stuff
if it
live without?
works, if people use it responsibly, I don't think we need an agreement.
I think that's a
And if
key.
they
people
don't,
using
then
this
we
one.
have existing regulatory authority, but I didn't feel like it would be a good use of staff time to assume the worst.
Maybe there's less temptation to ride the bike into the water since we're not an island.
Yeah, we could jump through a lot of hoops speculating about what might happen. I think that just right. Let's kind of wait and see. If the worst that happens is people keep leaving the bike in the middle of the sidewalk or something, you can pick it up and move it 2 feet. That's not such a big deal.
Yeah.
The other trick is sign up for it so that if you have to move a bike, you can.
Sign up for what?
Sign up so you can unlock the bike to move it.
I think that would be a bigger deal for gig, because I know of at least one case where one was improperly parked and one of my staff was like, oh, I'll just move it. Easy to do.
Yeah. But you can actually lift the Lime Bike.
Yeah, the line bike, yeah.
The front wheel will be, the front wheel is free, right? Because the lock's in the back, from what I've seen of the pictures. So you can always lift the back and roll it around.
Yeah.
Other questions, comments, opinions? We've already sort of covered that, haven't we? Great. It'll be really interesting to see what happens. I look forward to seeing that. We've run out of the agendized announcements, but we can't let this opportunity go by without saying that the hawk light is activated on San Pablo. And congratulations, and hooray.
It took a long time, but
It really did.
About 6 months.
yeah,
It was installed.
actually, that's right.
The
Yeah.
only saving grace was that the protected refuge in the middle of the street was actually quite useful, even without the hawk light. So now it's a complete unit. That's great.
So I would like any feedback that you have. Caltrans asked me that about next month I start collecting data on yield behavior, any kind of, also from the police, I need to send an email for any collision, like bumper-to-bumper collision, because people are not used to it, and some people stop, and some people just go. So they're interested in knowing behaviors about drivers who intend to go, but, they have to stop because of the car and they hit the car that is stopped. So rear-end collisions, basically.
I don't have any observations on the Hawk yet. Did have an interesting observation last weekend on the signal at Monroe.
The signal is still a work in progress.
Well, yeah, no, that's fine, but it was interesting because the light was red, and we were waiting for the bike signal to turn green. The bike signal turned green. The car to the left of us went straight through the intersection, followed about 2 seconds later by UCPD, who had their lights going and pulled them over. Because the car went on the bike signal, not on the vehicular signal. And they weren't turning or anything, it was just going straight through. It just kind of made me ponder whether we want to have sort of shields or something on the edge of the bike signal to kind of make it a little harder for cars to see. Signage feels like it starts to get messy if you're going to put signs saying cars obey car signal, not bike signal. I don't think there's a standard sign for that, but maybe
Shield
just,
would be,
yeah.
And the conundrum we're having right now is that the red bicycle signal, while the cars have a green, and I've been suggested to Caltrans to consider flashing yellow. They said no, because you have a conflicting movement, which is the right turn into the mixed-use development. And I said, well, but usually
Every walk signal at every intersection in every city in the country has that same conflict.
yeah. So I said and well, how about leaving it dark? Then don't have a red. But and what are you going to do with the pedestrians? Well, the pedestrians should have that hand. But I don't know. It's a conflict again. But they haven't resolved with all of the suggestions. I sent a picture of a bicycle, the bicycle signal in Emeryville. They have exactly the same thing, and then they have flashing yellow. So I asked the engineer there, and then he sent the timing sheets, and I sent it to Caltrans. They're still looking at that. So, but that was before the holiday, so I'm going to send a reminder again.
If there was no bicycle signal but just a pedestrian crosswalk, wouldn't you expect that the walk signal would be on at the same time as the green light?
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Yet now the walk signal is not on at the same time as the green light.
Yeah, it's going to take a while for I think Caltrans to get a little more comfortable with how some of those things work. The other one is with regards to the Hawk, which our configuration here is different from the one that we're building on Ashby at Hillegas, which is at a full four-way intersection, and that's that on that bike boulevard, we'll have bikes approaching the signal potentially at significant speed. And if they're looking at the pedestrian countdown signal for the Hawk and thinking of that the same way they think at a normal signal, I see the countdown going to 6 seconds. I've got time to clear. If I go quick, zip out.
But that's when
the Hawk goes to flashing red for the cars.
yeah.
So the cars have a stop sign, not a red light. So we've asked Caltrans to allow us to not go to flashing red until the countdown finishes.
That's what I was trying to ask them. And they said that MUTCD, they told me about the MUTCD, and I said, well, but this is dangerous. It might be more of a concern when we have our bicycle crossing there.
Mm-hmm. Right, and that's just it. For pedestrians, it's not as big a deal. Pedestrians are moving slower. But bikes can move quickly, and same as cars do. Yellow means speed up, right? That's the way people behave, and we've trained them with other countdown signals how to go. So that was the area of concern, and certainly if there's more conversation around that, I'm happy to share whatever answer we get back, which will probably be same as yours, but that was something.
And you're talking to David Mann. I'm talking to him, and he's very open to a lot of
I think
conversation.
Hamid talked to somebody else at Caltrans.
Okay.
So
We're a little off the agenda.
Anyway.
Well, let's coordinate, because I think we
Information
should.
regarding Hawks.
No, it's good. It's good. It's good.
We should coordinate, because this is important here.
Definitely.
The ghost of Alan Riffer is haunting me. I'm sorry. It's a good dialogue. I really don't want to put a stop to it, but
To-
it's not on the agenda at
The
all.
detail, yeah. Sorry.
Right, so great. Is there going to be an opening ceremony?
Oh, yeah. Jeff?
We don't have anything planned. If we had a little breathing room of time, a number of people have asked to do something. I don't know. It's not. I'll talk it over with her later.
Would you like help planning something?
Certainly, yes. That would be nice.
Let's talk about that.
Okay.
Okay. That would be great. I think that would be a good partnership. I want to mention that Bike to Work Day is on May 10th this year. It's likely that Bike to School Day will be on the 9th, the Wednesday before the Thursday of Bike to Work Day. Does anybody else have any announcements?
Yeah, two. Isn't the parklet ribbon cutting going to be February 24th or 25th? I thought I heard discussion about that. I could be wrong, but I thought that's.
I haven't heard anything yet.
Well, keep your eyes out anyway. I hear it's going to happen sometime.
Yeah.
For
In
the
the next month.
As You Wish Parklet?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I thought it was February 24th or something.
Oh, probably. I can confirm with Gail because he's
Yeah.
the project manager.
Okay. And then I won't be here for the next commission meeting. I think it's midwinter break, right, for Albany Unified.
Oh, is
So,
it?
yeah, I'll be out of town.
Have fun.
Thank you.
If that's going to be an issue for more than one other of you, please let us know. So if there would be an issue with the quorum, we'll reschedule if you wanted.
There's not a plan yet, but there might be a college trip, but I'll look at it.
For anyone interested in new bike facilities, the Hearst Complete Streets in Berkeley is having a ribbon cutting at 10 o'clock tomorrow, followed at 11 o'clock, a ribbon cutting on the other side of campus on Bancroft for the transit and cycle track project on Bancroft. Lots of
If
fun.
you go through Spauer Plaza, there's I think the Cal Jazz Choir sings at 11.
Good timing.
You can hit the whole thing. No, that's fabulous. It's a great facility on both sides, so congratulations. Shall we move on to future agenda items?
Right. We have
So we've got several mentioned here, transportation and street parking elements of the new campus for the Albany Middle School at San Gabriel, North Albany traffic calming, 900 block of Peralta speed hump and bulb out striping, Albany pavement program, and review of the 2017 to 2019 work plan, including and to, I guess, updating it to include the traffic calming policy revision of speed and volume criteria. So does anybody have anything to add? That we have previously possibly discussed and is not on the list? Okay. I know we discussed it at one point recently, the active transportation plan re-up or reevaluation. When are we planning that?
When are we planning? I'm writing a grant application for Caltrans planning grants right now. for
Okay,
that.
so it needs to get funded.
Yes.
Great. Okay. So that puts it at least 6 to 9 months out?
At least.
Whenever they award, and then we have to really see if we get it. If not, we'll have to see what other alternatives we have for funding.
Yeah, I think it would be great to see how this grant application plays out first. I think it is time to update the ATP. I don't think there's any question about that. And if we can use someone else's money to do it, that's our first choice.
So it's not on the immediate horizon for the agenda, which is what we're talking about.
Not in the next couple of months, but I do see the absolute value of starting that process, within the next year or so. And
2018 for an update.
Right, we're due now. It's a 5-year-old plan, and we identified that in the general plan, among other places, as something that needed to be updated. We'll get to it.
We did talk tonight about the Kains-Adams pilot, so that goes on the future agenda. And we talked about trying to combine the visit of the police chief, probably. Yeah. All right. With that, I'd like to close the meeting at a nice early hour for us.
For us.
Yeah, thank you.